Andrew here, and today I'm going to be doing an updated room tour. I know I did one back in January, although it's amazing just how many things have changed since then, so I figured people have been asking for an updated one for quite a while, and they got all these new cabinets recently, and people have really been wanting to see what the room looks like now, so I figured it's probably a good time to give it a shot. So basically what we're going to be doing is we're going to be going through this entire room, and then we're going to be going and doing all of the stuff out in the second room. So it's going to be a really big in-depth tour on pretty much everything I have. So first thing we're going to start with is the NES games.
11 world-class contenders.
So here is sort of the main focus of my collection. I mean, of course I collect a lot of things, although I've always really loved NES games. Right now I'm up to 692 different games, so I mean there's less than 100 to go, because there's just under 800 games, unlicensed and licensed in total. So yeah, 692 includes both licensed and licensed. There's a whole bunch of different things here. People who saw my last whole collection video will know I used to have my games in two different spots, although now I've kind of combined them into one massive wall. And there's boxed games and a whole bunch of different things. Even some Famicom down here as well. So yeah, I really love NES, and even though I collect everything, usually I'll go out of my way just a bit more to get NES things, just because it's the very first console I ever played, and I've always just really liked NES.
And meet the challenge of Gyromite.
Alright, so we're going to move clockwise around the room. So to the right of my NES games is my console setup. Now my TV has 17 different consoles hooked up to it, if you count the Sega CD and 32X as different consoles. I sometimes do, since they play completely different games. But if you don't, then my TV only has 15 consoles hooked up to it. So anyway, like I just said, we have a Genesis Model 2 here with the top loader Sega CD and the 32X. To the right of that, we have a Sega Saturn. Below that, we have the special light blue edition Nintendo 64. And then to the right of that, Platinum Gamecube, Super Nintendo top loader, or Super Nintendo 2, since they were both top loaders. Then below that, we have the Gold Star 3DO, and then to the right of that, I don't know if you'll be able to see it down there, we have the Turbo Duo, which plays both the TurboGrafx card and CD games.
Super Smash Brothers, where all your favorite characters go toe-to-toe.
So to the right of those things is my TV, and then underneath and beside my TV, we have some other consoles too. So like over here we have the Sega Dreamcast. Over here we have it's not a DVD player, it's actually a Philips CDI, one of the models of it. Down here we have a Gemini, which plays Atari 2600 games, and below that a PlayStation 2, which I use for both PS1 and PS2 gaming. Up here we have the Wii, the special limited edition blue one. Over here we have the clear green Xbox, and below that we have two NESs. The top loader is hooked up, and also below that we have just a regular one, which I use for things like Game Genie and like that, since Game Genie kind of wrecks the pins inside it, so I want to keep my NES 2 as good as possible, and the one below is kind of just one, it's not so great already, so I figure just use the Game Genie with that and keep my NES 2 in good condition.
You're new for your Nintendo Entertainment System.
Alright, so now let's move on to the first cabinet. Now, first thing that people always notice is that there's a PlayStation 3 sign at the top, although everything we find in here is not going to be PlayStation related. That's just because I only have 6 big metal cabinets, and I can't get individual signs for like every single thing I have. So like a Neogeo sign for the Neogeo stuff, and things like that. So you will see things in here, or even for all the cabinets, you will see that the sign on top doesn't always correspond to everything within. So just a bit of a warning to that, because people always like to seem to point that out. That there's like, there's Nintendo stuff in the PlayStation cabinet. But anyway, moving on to the first shelf. You'll see it definitely doesn't have anything to do with PlayStation, like I just said. First thing we have here is the Vectrex. Now the Vectrex is a really old kind of arcade simulating console, where it had a TV built in, and the really kind of arcade controller, sort of paddle for you to use. And there's a whole bunch of different games for that, which were really neat. Moving on to the left of that, we have a whole bunch of different Virtual Boy things. Some of my boxed games there, a Virtual Boy that you can see loose out there, a controller, the AC adapter in the box, and one of my favorite things in my collection, my Virtual Boy carrying case, which does have another Virtual Boy in it, and that's in great shape, and I absolutely love that. And then down there at the far end we have the U-Force, which some people might know is one of the worst controllers ever made. It's like a controller, but you don't actually touch anything. It's really weird for the NES, and overall, it never really works the way it's supposed to. So moving down the shelf, we have TurboGrafx 16 stuff, and the Japanese variation, the PC Engine. And starting over here, we also have a few other things like the Turbo Express, which is the portable version of the TurboGrafx 16. It plays the exact same games, except this one allows you to play them anywhere, which is really cool. Over here we have a box controller and also a box turbo tap, and we also have the Japanese variation of the turbo tap, which has the smaller controller plug variation in it, which is great because the North American one unfortunately only has the bigger variation, which doesn't work with Turbo Duo or the Japanese controllers. Here we have one of the TurboGrafx 16 arcade sticks, which is really cool. Over here, it's of course a TurboGrafx 16 in the box, and there's a loose version here, so that everyone can see what it looks like, including the controller, which is awesome. And this right here is the SuperGrafx, which is also a Japanese variation of the TurboGrafx 16, although it plays a few games that just the normal PC Engine won't, although unfortunately there's only like 7 or so exclusive games for it, so it didn't have too much support, but it's still a really cool console, plus it plays all of the original PC Engine games too, which is really neat. And then this right here, complete in the box, is an adapter which allows you to put the PC Engine CD adapter and use it with the SuperGrafx, since they're built a bit differently, so you need that adapter to do that. Now down here is the PlayStation shelf. Now over here we have some light guns for a time splitter. We have the slim PlayStation 2 and the silver wireless controller with it. We have the internet adapter. Taiko Drum Master has the controller and game in there. We have the Beatmania controller. This isn't the official Konami one. This is just another one of the aftermarket ones. Over here we have a massive, like real arcade-sized arcade stick for the original PlayStation, although it will work with a PS2 as well, and it's for 2 players, so that's really cool. And over here, we actually have the link cable for linking 2 of the original PlayStations together, and we have a whole bunch of different models of the original PlayStation. There's different regions, some of them are modded, so I keep a whole bunch of them just for that. So here we have an original Xbox, but it's the clear blue edition, which is really cool. And down here we have a boxed PlayStation, a boxed game manager, which pretty much just organizes your original Xbox games, although I suppose other cases would fit in there too. Right here is the Action Max, which is a really weird console. It actually uses VHS tapes, and they're all light gun games, so as you watch the tape, things will flash, and you're supposed to shoot them as they go by. It's really weird, and it's not really the greatest thing. Down here we have a hard case for an original Xbox, and it has all the hookups and everything in there as well. Over to the left, we have the Lethal Enforcers Sega CD game that has the light gun and everything in there too. Below that is a box Virtual Boy. Absolutely everything's in there. It's 100% complete. At the very bottom, we have Halo 3 Legendary Edition complete. I've never even taken everything out of it. It's never really been open. We have some TurboGrafx 16 controllers, some Japanese TurboGrafx or PC Engine arcade sticks, which are really cool. And then over here we have a boxed Turbo Duo, and below that the front loader real Panasonic 3DO complete in the box.
The best action game ever.
Alright, so now we are moving on to the second cabinet. It has a Nintendo sign on top, although what we're starting with actually isn't going to be Nintendo at all. It's actually their arch nemesis from back in the 90s, and that is Sega. So if we look right here, we have a whole bunch of different Sega consoles and accessories and things like that. And this shelf is mostly dedicated to the Genesis, like right here. We have the power base converter complete in the box, and that allows you to play Master System games on your Genesis console. Below that, we have one of the Sega Genesis arcade sticks, and the one in front of it is actually a third-party one, but the one in the box is complete, and that one actually was made by Sega. To the left of, to the right of that, we have the Sega Genesis Cd X, and that plays both Genesis games and CD games, and based on the X after the CD, you'd figure it might play 32X games as well, though it actually doesn't, which is really silly. But it does play Genesis and CD games. To the right of that, in front here we have the Sega Genesis Nomad, and that lets you play your Sega Genesis games anywhere, as long as you have the battery pack. Behind that we have a box, and in quite good condition, Sega 32X. Everyone knows the notorious add-on, or one of the add-ons, but probably the worst of the two, for the Sega Genesis. Above that we have a whole bunch of different box controllers, some official, some not. We have the official remote control ones there, the wireless ones, which are really neat. And yeah, continuing on to the right of that, we have the Sega Genesis Model 3, and that is, came after the second model of course, and that is an even smaller version of the Sega Genesis, because to the right of that you'll see on top of the front loader Sega CD, you have the original Sega Genesis model, so yeah, a lot bigger than the Sega Genesis 3, and then we have the rarer Sega CD front-loading one on the bottom, which does have a lot more problems than the side one, which you can see complete in the box in the back, but it is really cool to have the front-loading one. And then to the right of that, We actually have the box for the Sega Genesis 3. It's kind of in the corner there, so you can't see it too well, but the box is quite small, just like the console itself. Anyway, moving down from there, we have the Dreamcast shelf. Now, starting on the left, we actually have some Japanese Dreamcast stuff. We have a Japanese Dreamcast complete in the box with the Dreamcast Dream Passport, which is kind of like the web browser that came with, or the Japanese web browser for the Japanese Dreamcast. We have a Japanese or a Sega Dreamcast light gun. This massive arcade stick, which has this crazy rolling ball thing, joystick and buttons all over the place. It's really weird. And this right here is the, what's it called, the fishing rod for your Sega bass fishing. In behind that we have a Japanese arcade, just Japanese Dreamcast arcade stick complete in the box. And to the right of that we have the Dreamcast mouse, Dreamcast microphone for Seaman hiding back there. Japanese, sorry, not Japanese, but Sega Dreamcast memory card complete in the box. A few controllers complete in the box. There's the memory card that goes in there. And the ultimate sports version of the Dreamcast, which was of course the black variation, and there's one in the box and also one loose in front for show. So below that we have just a bit more Dreamcast stuff. We have 2 of the keyboards complete in the box, and we have a few of the different colored memory cards that were available for the to go along with the different colored controllers that were released with the Dreamcast. Moving on to the right, we're going to start seeing some Sega Saturn stuff. Oh, there are a few controllers up there, like I was just saying, the different colored ones. Although this right here is actually a really big Japanese Sega Saturn control stick, and like you can see, it's like right from out of an arcade, and it's really good, really well built, and it's really great to use. It supports 2 players, so that's really neat. Moving down from that, we actually have the Sega Saturn itself with the Netlink adapter inside there. To the right of that, we have the Sega Saturn steering wheel. And more to the right, we have the Virtual Cop light gun, a clip stick for the Sega Saturn, and then some Japanese Sega Saturn stuff. Even more to the right, this is the white version of the Japanese Sega Saturn, a memory card, a multi-tap adapter, and one of the complete bigger round controllers for the Sega Saturn complete in the box. This shelf is home to the Sega Master System. Now this right here is the very first model of it, and then back here, complete in the box, is the Sega Master System 2. It was it was a theme back then or even today, to eventually make a smaller version of the console. So there's a loose version right here, which you can see, and this kind of flips up so you can put your game inside there. Behind here we have the Sega 3D glasses, which worked with only the first model of the Sega Master System, since this one did not have a card input, but that's really neat to see that 3D gaming was around even way back then. Even with NES there were some games that supported 3D glasses. Right here we have a Master System rolling ball sports controller, and in the back here we have a few Game Gear accessories like the power pack, and the stereo radio tuner is over here. We also have the Sega Game Gear, and one of them is complete in the box in the back, and we even have the adapter here, which allows you to play your Sega Master System games anywhere you go by using this with your Sega Game Gear. Down below here, we have some Sega Dreamcasts and Sega Saturns complete in the box, along with another version of the Sega Dreamcast light gun. To the right of that, we sort of have Sega's version of the Super Scope, which was called the Menacer, and it had 2 sights, and it was a pretty cool light gun, although it wasn't used for very many games. And then to the right of that, we have the Japanese exclusive Konami Dance Dance Revolution dance pad to go with also the Japanese exclusive Dance Dance Revolution game for the Sega Dreamcast. Alright, so in the third big metal cabinet, we have a ton of Nintendo stuff. Starting with the top shelf here, we have a whole bunch of Super Nintendo accessories. So we have double wireless controllers here. They're not official, but they're still actually really good controllers. We have a boxed Super Nintendo in the back that actually comes with the Super Mario All-Stars with Super Mario World cartridge on it, which is actually not the easiest thing to find. So it's really cool to kind of have the whole set that came with. And this right here, 2 double Super Nintendo control sticks. They actually come apart, so if you want to use them separately, or you could keep them together like this for it to be like an actual arcade, which is pretty neat. This over here, we have the Super Scope. One of them loose, one complete in the box right here. And we also have the still sealed, never opened, batter up baseball accessory for Super Nintendo baseball games, which is really neat. Down one shelf below that, we have a whole bunch more Super Nintendo stuff. So over here, we kind of start with North American things and then move towards Japanese things. So right here, this is of course the North American version of the Super Nintendo with a North American box Super Nintendo in the back. A few box controllers. The X-Band, which was actually used to play games over the internet, although it only supported like 1 or 2 games, so it was never really that good, and it was probably really expensive, so only like the richest people ever had it, but it's still a kind of funny thing to see that it ever existed. This right here is the Super Multi-Tap complete in the box. This is actually made by Hudson Soft, because unlike the NES, the Super Nintendo does actually not have a first-party multi-tap. So if you wanted to play 4-player games, you actually had to get a third-party one. Down here, we have the Super Nintendo 2. It's not the easiest thing to find in the box, and I really love this one. And this is actually also the model that I have hooked up to the TV, just because it saves a lot of space, which is really convenient. This down here is the Super NES Advantage. So this is like the NES Advantage, except this one is not also like the multi-tap. It's not a first-party Nintendo piece of hardware. This one was actually made by Aes Controllers, although it's still quite a solid arcade stick. So over here, we move into more of the foreign territory. So over on the left, we had like all the North American stuff, and now we're looking at some of the Japanese stuff. This right here is, of course, the Super Famicom, the Japanese counterpart to the Super NES that we got in North America, and the European one also looks a lot like the Japanese one too. And here is a controller which kind of shows off how the buttons were a whole bunch of different crazy colors, unlike the North American one, which was just pink and purple. Or more purple, kind of pinkish, but not really. In the back, box, Super Famicom. Right here, we actually have a Super Nintendo memory card. Now what you could do with, Super Famicom memory card. Now in Japan, you could buy this and then you could take it over to a machine and then you could load any of the games, like there was a whole bunch of games you could select from on the machine, and you could load one of them onto this cartridge and then go home and play it. So that was pretty cool. And this right here is a game copier. So you can put like your Super Nintendo Famicom games and stuff like that onto a floppy disk. Not much point of it today, although it's still just kind of a neat piece of history to have. And over here on the right, we have the Super Famicom mouse. So it's pretty much exactly like the Super Nintendo mouse, except the box is different, and the Japanese version of Mario Paint is also in there. Moving on down, we have the Gamecube Shelf. Now there's a whole bunch of interesting things on here. We have a whole bunch of different console colors and different bundles in the back. Right here, this is actually my Japanese purple GameCube, which I showed me getting in a video not too long ago. Over here we have a sealed orange controller. To the left, North American black GameCube with the Game Boy player on the bottom. And then just the controller and a memory card here. This thing here, this is really interesting. This is my complete in-box Korean Game Boy player. And one of the coolest things that you can see from this is that if you turn it over, you can see that in other regions, you could actually get different colors of the Game Boy player, depending on what color of GameCube you had. And that unfortunately wasn't something that we could do in North America, so it's kind of a shame, but it's still really cool just to see that in places like Japan and Korea, you could get different colors of the Game Boy player for your GameCube. Over here, to the left, we have a modem adapter, not very oftenly used. You don't even see them too often. So this one is still sealed, and you could use it for a few games, although unfortunately it wasn't too widely supported. And to the left, in a carrying case complete, we have a GameCube and all of the wires and stuff to go along with it in there. Moving down to the bottom shelf in this cabinet, with the Super Nintendo, then GameCube, and then Wii. So we kind of skipped 64, although we'll be coming back to that. A whole bunch of big boxed Wii games down here. Like, so we have Mario Kart with the wheel and all that over here. Wii Fit with the balance board and all that. Wii Sports Resort with the Wii Motion Plus. Wii Play with the extra remote. Some third-party random sports things for Wii Sports. The Animal Crossing microphone, which pretty much no one ever got, and came with the Wii Speak channel. And then over here, on the far left, we have a whole bunch of the like the big box games Super Mario All-Stars 25th Anniversary Edition, which came with the Super Nintendo game on a disc, and also a bonus disc with music and stuff like that from past Mario games. And then in the middle there, we have The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword with the Gold Wii Remote inside. At the very bottom, we just have some of my different boxed Wiis, so like the special edition blue one, the black one, and the red one, and there's also a few in behind too, like the box for the white one. And yeah, it just goes to show some of the neat bundles that the Wii had. Now we're moving on to the fourth cabinet, which has the PlayStation 3 sign on it. Now the funny part is, this case actually doesn't have any PlayStation stuff in it at all. But it does have some really cool things, at least, so hopefully that makes up for it. On the top shelf here, we have some CD consoles, some of the not so popular things that came out. They both came out around the same time, too. Right here, we have the Cdi 910. This is probably like the biggest and heaviest model of them all. Here we have a controller up here, a lot more like a traditional style controller. To the right here, we have the Cdi 450, and we have another kind of controller right here, where this is actually kind of like the control pad, and these are the different action buttons. It's really weird. But yeah, anyway, this one is a top loader, unlike the other one, which was a front loader. In the back here, we have the rollerball controller, complete in the box, with the really creepy kids on the front. I mean, it's kind of like staring into your soul, trying to like make you buy CGI stuff. I don't know. But anyway, over here, we have another version of the Cdi controller. This one obviously looks a lot more like your normal DVD, or I guess back then like VCR remote with play buttons and stuff like that. Although you can still use it for games, although it's very difficult. And then over there on the far right, not CDI related, we have the Panasonic 3DO. So the one that was hooked up to my TV was the Gold Star, but this one is the Panasonic front loader version. And there's also an extra controller on top, and the box controller too, so it's kind of see those things there. And the next shelf down, we have my boxed Neogeo Advanced Entertainment System. So that is the home console. It's huge, and the box is huge as well. And anyone who knows anything about the Neogeo will just know just how big the cartridges are for it too, which we'll see some of later. Moving on to the right, we have an extra Neogeo, what's it called, AES controller. So you can kind of see just how big that is, although it's also a really awesome controller. I love that kind of clicking sound that the control stick makes. I love it when the arcade sticks do that. More to the right, we have some Neo Geo CD stuff. Well, actually, we have a Neo Geo memory card there, and then behind that we have some Neo Geo CD controllers, and then to the right of that we have the Neo Geo CD, which is a pretty cool console. It actually had some pretty decent games. Moving down to the next shelf, we have the Nintendo 64 stuff. So yeah, none of it was on the other shelf because I just have so much Nintendo 64 stuff that it needs like 3 shelves. I mean in the other cabinet. That's why I had to skip over it when I went from Super Nintendo to the Gamecube. But anyway, so here's all the 64 stuff. I have 4 of the different super fun colors here. The light blue one was hooked up to the TV. Unfortunately, I don't have the smoky gray see-through one, although to make up for it, I do have the Japanese exclusive clear blue and white one, which was never released here, complete in the box, so I think that's more than good enough to have, although I do hope to get the clear gray ones someday. And moving on down, some more 64 stuff. We skipped a few things on that shelf, although we'll go back to them in a bit. Right here, we have a Japanese Nintendo 64 with a neon green clear controller on top. And down here we have the Disc Doctor 64, which is kind of like the game Copier I showed you for the Super Nintendo, although it takes CDs instead of floppies. But again, an obsolete thing, which is just kind of cool to have. Over here, we have the Pokemon Nintendo 64 in great shape with the matching controller to go along with it, and that's really cool. Also, we have the Star Wars 1 limited edition box set, which is really silly because you'd think that maybe the 64 had like a special like Darth Vader design or something on it, although it's actually just the same normal boring gray Nintendo 64, but it comes with Star Wars 1 Episode Racer, and the game's not even in the box. I mean, it's kind of a lame set. The coolest part about it is actually the design on the front of the console box. On the bottom shelf down here, we have a whole bunch of accessories over there, and over here we have some more accessories, a few Japanese games in the box, and also my memory card collection, just my bag of like all the different variations of Nintendo 64 memory cards and expansion packs and things like that. So they're all there, and I just love collecting those things. I don't know, I mean, I don't need that many memory cards, but it's cool just to see how many different variations of it actually came out for whatever reason. Moving back on up, I'm kind of do a thing where we come over here, and I go over a few of the things that were really hard to get to while the doors were on the other side. So again, you can see the blue and white Japanese exclusive Nintendo 64. And if you look right here, I actually have an extra controller for it, which you can kind of see. So it kind of half blue, half white. It's kind of a strange thing, but since it's a Japanese exclusive, it's still really neat. These things here are the 12 slot game holders for the Nintendo 64, so you can pull them out. And there's a whole bunch of you can put your games inside and stuff like that, so you keep them all organized, which is pretty cool. Moving on down, we have the Arcade Shark, which is kind of like a cool arcade stick from the Nintendo 64. We have the microphone for Hey You Pikachu, and we also have a set of headphones, which is cool because you can plug your audio cables into here, and then you can kind of wear these headphones. So it's really neat since it's wireless and everything like that. It's really cool, and the sound's really good for it too. And then moving on down, we have a whole bunch of boxed Nintendo 64 accessories. So like memory cards, rumble packs, expansion pack, cleaner kit. Some of them are even still sealed. A few different kinds of controllers. There's a Game Shark over there. So it's really neat just to see how many different accessories came out for the 64. And it is not the easiest thing to come by some of them in the box. So it's really neat. And I just love having these. They're really cool. On the bottom here, we have some things that aren't Nintendo 64 related at all, but they just kind of fit under here. So we have the Odyssey 200 and Odyssey 2 over there on the left, both complete in the box. Atari Xe, complete in the massive box. Some people think like the original PlayStation 3's box was big, but this thing's actually bigger than that, if you can believe it. It's huge. And also a game I haven't it was supposed to be included with it. You can see Flight Simulator 2. Just haven't got to putting that in there because it's so difficult to get this box out because it's so huge. So right now, we are moving on to the 5th massive metal cabinet, and this one has the Xbox sign. Whole bunch of different older things in here. The funny thing is, it kind of gets newer as you go down to the left. We've kind of been going from some of the newer stuff back towards where I put a lot of the older things like Pong consoles and Atari or whatever. So yeah, here we're going to see some of the very first video game things that were out there. On the top shelf here, we have a few Atari things. We have the Atari 400 computer. It's very old. Over here we have the Atari Xe, also a computer, although it had a lot of games and stuff like that too. It also came with a white version of the Atari controller that everyone is probably familiar with. And then down there on the right, we have the Leisure Vision, which I believe was a Canada exclusive. It might have been released in other places, although I think it was under a different name. But anyway, yeah, the Leisure Vision, pretty obscure console. It's pretty weird, and it was released back around the same time as Atari and all that stuff. Down here, we have some more Atari stuff, although this is a lot more recent than things like the Atari 400. We have the Jaguar, and then on top of that, we have a whole bunch of things, such as overflow of Neogeo stuff. Because if you look to the left, you'll see the Neogeo CD, but unfortunately the shelf I had all the other Neogeo stuff on was kind of full. So my Neogeo Pockets are over here, and some of the awesome games for them are there too. Neogeo Pocket was actually a really underrated handheld. It was actually pretty cool. Over here, boxed Atari controller and another loose one here so everyone can see what it looks like. It's really debatable over whether it was a good controller or not. I'm not a big fan of this kind of upward to the right curve of the button layout, but it's still pretty neat. Of course, boxed, complete Atari Jaguar right there. And to the right, the other animal-themed Atari console, or the other console that was named after an animal, the Lynx, the massive portable handheld console. The one in the box right there, and the one that's in front of it is actually the Lynx 2. In behind that, I don't know if it will show up, there's actually a carrying case, and that has the original version of the Lynx in it, and that thing is just huge. Anyone who's seen it will know. To the right, some boxed Atari Lynx games, an Atari 2600 game complete in the box, a Star Raiders with the kind of number pad that it came with for all the extra commands, and even back behind that, we have an Atari Jaguar, another one. Well, that's just kind of a box that was custom made at the video game store for when they sold a used one, because I guess someone actually bought a used Atari Jaguar. It came in that box. I bought that secondhand off another person on the internet, so I actually don't know exactly which store it came from, but it's still neat, so I just left it in it and put it back there. Moving down, we have some other Atari consoles. Right here is, of course, the notorious 5200. This is one of the versions. Right here we have the controller everyone probably knows about the 5200 controllers that don't work so well, that look like phones for whatever reason. A lot of the older consoles had that number pad. To the right, we have the 7800. We have the more standard controller that we saw in North America here, although we also have the really cool European exclusive controller, which looks a lot more like the Sega Master System one with the 2 buttons, and also the thumbstick that kind of comes on and off of the control pad. And on the far right there, we have the Gemini, which is just another version of the Atari made by Coleco. Yeah, so it pretty much plays 2600 games, although it has a really good controller that I really like. It even has the built-in kind of a paddle turning thing on the bottom too. Moving down, we have a whole bunch of different variations of the Atari 2600. So I mean, there's the Gemini, but these ones are all a bit more similar. They're just like slight variations from each other. This one right here is the Heavy Sixer, and the Heavy Sixer is the Atari 2600 variation that has 6 switches. And it was a lot heavier than the other ones because it was like full of copper wire and stuff like that. It was a very early model. You can tell the Heavy Sixer from the other ones that have 6 switches because of how it's really curved on the corner here. Well, when we move on to the other version of the Atari that had 6 switches, it has a lot more of an angle here rather than a curve. So yeah, the only difference between this one and this one is that this one's a lot lighter and this curve here, but it still has 6 switches and the wood grain and looks almost exactly the same. And many people who don't know what to look for would probably think they were exactly the same. Moving on, I'm going to move this here so that people can get in here and see exactly what the difference is this time. We have another version of the Atari that looks very similar to that one, except this one only has 2 switches on each side. So they went from 6 switches to 4 switches and put a few of them on the back instead. That's where the other 2 switches went that aren't any longer on the front. Moving down, we have some mini versions of the Atari 2600, and even the mini version had 2 variations. One with just a small kind of colored stripe here, and then one with a massive one that kind of went from one end of the console to the other. To the left of that, we have the Telegames Video Arcade. This one looks a bit different than the other ones. The color, it's white here, but overall it still does the exact same thing. And then moving down to the very last one on the left, just switch this door over here, we have the black version of the Atari 2600. Again, only 2 switches on each side. They actually moved away from the wood grain, which is kind of surprising, but again, still plays the exact same game. So I mean, people think that there's too many variations of consoles today. Well, look at the Atari. There was like how many of them right there. It's kind of ridiculous. And anyway, moving to the very bottom, so off of the shelves, we have some box things. So on the very top here, it can be very hard to see, we have a Tandy computer, which is sitting on top of one of the original Atari computer system, video computer system boxes, which is complete and has everything in there. Underneath that is the very first version of the Atari 5200 box, and this also has a different model of Atari 5200 than the one that was on the shelf. This one has 4 controller ports, while the one up there only had 2, and also this box is huge, as people I'm sure will be able to see. Moving on to the left, if you see to the very left of that 5200 box, you have another version of the 5200 box, but was much smaller, and also had a different version of the 5200 in it. Right above that, we have the Atari 800 XL computer. Of course, 800 it came after the Atari 400 computer. And then to the right of all of that stuff, on top we have the Sega Genesis video game organizer. Let's just move these shelves so we can get a good look at that. Now, so basically what this does is you can just put your games in it, your Genesis in it, your controllers in it, and it just keeps them all in there organized. But what I don't understand is, unless your controllers are wireless, this setup kind of sucks, because it shows it on top of their TV, but then if you actually play it without taking the Genesis out, the cords are going to be hanging in front of the screen. Overall, it's kind of a silly thing, but it's neat to have it complete in the box. And below that, I have a complete in the box Philips CDI. Now that's not really something you see too often. As you can see, the box is pretty plain and boring, but yeah, boxed CDI. It's definitely not the most common thing out there.